Good morning.
What's
Hello.
morning?
Hello. 4 minutes after. Thanks for making the time today. We're going to do another Tuesday training today. Listing agreement, exclusive right of listing agreement, Minnesota line by line. And this is YouTube live. It is recorded, so you guys can watch it later. So all I ask is if you have client-specific questions, please try to neutralize any client names by saying Mr. Buyer, Mr. Seller. And if you have a detailed question that you don't feel comfortable asking on a live or a recorded training, ask us on the side, and we would be happy to answer these questions. So I'm Nick Levy. You guys know me on this YouTube, and with me is Pat Paulson. What do we like to call you, Pat? Chief of Information Technology, chief of something. What are you chief of?
We got to work on the title.
Yes. Yeah, I'm okay with anything that's respectful.
and Carson Brooks, managing broker, and then we have Sarah McConnell, VP of Training, EXIT Realty Metro on as well, and we have some Metro agents with us, Jacob Freilich, Jenny Hamilton, and Kylie Braddock with us, and as they hop on. You know, they mother agents may hop on as we go, but we like to be prompt in our brokerage, and we're all busy agents and like to get on with our day. So I'm going to start. Bear with me 1 second. I'm going to screen share the actual listing agreement. Bear with me here. There we go. You guys see my screen? Okay, thumbs up. Good. All right. So I put it in the YouTube description as well, but anything that is said here on this training does not constitute legal advice. We're not attorneys, and we talk a lot of strategy in our brokerage. And just know that anything that's said here about any portion of this form is our opinion only, and does not constitute legal advice. So we like to get that out of the way. All right, let's start. And of course, you know, line by line, we got to keep it simple in the beginning, the date you're drafting the contract, okay? And then line 2, page 1 of X, how many pages you have. If you're adding addenda to this agreement, make sure you include all the pages in your page numbers. Line 3, definitions. Contract involves the property located at. House number, street address, city of. Line 4, county of. Line 5, state of Minnesota zip code. Line 5 as well. And then legal description in line 6. Now with a lengthy legal description. Pat, Carson, Sarah, what do you guys like to do with a lengthy legal description that won't fit in this line?
I do an addendum.
Or mailing address. So we need to, as best as possible, add that in.
Legal description, right. Where do you like to put it? Sarah, you said you add an addenda?
My
Yeah.
audio work?
Yep.
Okay.
Audio's working.
I wasn't sure my audio was working.
Yep.
Yep.
You're working,
Yep.
Carson.
I mean, the only caution is if it's unusually long, which we don't typically have happen in the metro area, more in rural areas where they might be a meets and bounds or different type of description, but somewhere we need to include it in the list.
Okay. And then line 7, seller is an individual estate trust corporation with personal sellers, first full name, middle initial, last name. You know, we like to be thorough on legal contracts with individuals, estates, trusts, corporations. Pat, Carson, Sarah, how do you guys like to handle entities? What do you like to see on this line?
The full legal name of the entity.
Okay.
The seller is the actual entity if it's owned by an entity, whether it's an S corp or a trust or an estate would be the third. The signer may be different, but legally attached to that entity.
And you want to put as executor or on an estate situation, Carson, what would you recommend? The name of the estate plus the name of the executor too, or not?
It would It would be the name of the person who would sign would be the legal personal representative. If they have received the letter of administration, and then they can sign their name as PR for the estate of. So the estate name would be on the line as seller. The signature line would have a different name.
You know,
Okay.
ultimately for the sale of the property, the title companies are going to require that whoever signs on behalf of the entity is authorized to sign on behalf of the entity. So they're going to have to provide the entity, the seller is going to have to provide legal documentation that shows that. And so why not ask for that now? You know, they're going to have that to sell. Why not ask for that at this point?
I totally agree with that, Pat. We can get that to the title company early, and that will ensure that we have the correct name and seller. The ones that are the most complicated or confusing to sellers is the estate situation, because they may assume that they have the right and authority, and we want to make sure that that has been granted.
Yeah.
Okay. Great advice. Line 8, broker is, and we pre-fill this to us. And then line 9, contract start date, starts on and ends on 11:59 p.m. on the end date. Line 10, this contract terminates upon successful closing of the properties, in parentheses, specified this contract or expiration or cancellation of this contract, whichever occurs first. Now, properties meaning more than one parcel. I think Pat and Carson have experience with this right now, correct? You have to add all the parcels in your listing.
We actually have 3 separate purchase agreements for the 3 separate parcels.
Okay, you did 3 separate contracts? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, this allows you to have, multiple parcels with one listing contract.
Sure. And then contract term length, it dictates, the market dictates the contract term length, and your negotiation with the seller dictates the contract length. We always try to go 6 months, 180 days. Some commercial or other special non-residential property, maybe a year, maybe a year and a half. It's all what's negotiated with the seller. And I would be cautious going shorter than 6 months, depending on the market, just because you always want to have to shorten up a term versus lengthen it in the middle of a transaction. So, of course, this contract is fulfilled once the closing happens, and then that timeline is done. But if you have to extend it another 2 months, and then you're in the middle of a heated negotiation, it can be sticky. So, but we want the contract to cover the period of start of the listing to the closing. Any thoughts on that? Anyone else?
I agree. It's better to have it be longer and find a just cause to shorten it, such as a closing, but it's much more cumbersome to have to go extend and request more time. So well said. I would back up to Pat's comment about different agreements for different parcels. The distinction there is that what Pat was referring to was where the ownership was different from one PID to another.
Oh, okay.
If they are the identical owners, such as a condominium with a separate PID for a garage or a storage space, then they can all land on that line in the same listing agreement.
Got it. Okay. So
One thing
let's
of note,
see.
I don't know that this is important or not, but over the years, the listing contract and the buyer's representation agreement have become a little bit more similar, which kind of makes sense because they're contracts between brokers and clients, and they are dictated to some degree by state statute that requires certain things to be within these documents, like the cancellation clause that we're about to cover.
Pat's talking about line 12. This contract may only be canceled with written mutual agreement of all of the parties. Pretty self-explanatory. Price, seller offers the property for sale for the price of X upon the following terms. We pre-fill some standard terminology we use, cash or financing acceptable to the seller. It all depends on the seller situation and the terms they'll accept, which will change that line. And these lines are editable. We just pre-fill to try to make the contract easy to fill out, and speedy for you guys if you're in a pinch. And then any thoughts on 13, 14, Pat or Carson? Pretty self-explanatory.
Well,
Sarah,
I
agree.
sold a brownstone 4-unit building in Minneapolis once where the seller refused to accept all the money in the year of sale. He absolutely insisted on a contract for deed paid off over no less than 10 years.
Capital gains, I assume, Pat, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Special situation does happen. All right. Let's go on to line 15, listing. Seller, this is a long one, so don't fall asleep while I'm reading this. Listing, line 15 through 24. Seller gives broker exclusive right to sell the property. In exchange, broker agrees to list and market the property for sale. Broker may place a for sale sign and a lockbox with keys on the property unless prohibited by the governing authority, association, right, or somebody else. Seller understands this contract does not give the broker authority to rent or manage the property. Seller understands broker may be a member of the multiple listing service, MLS. And if broker is a member of the MLS and where available, broker may give information to the MLS concerning the property. Broker may place information on the internet concerning the property, including sold information, except as limited in the following MLS data feed options section, which follows. Upon final acceptance of a purchase agreement, seller allows broker to withdraw the property from the market. If the broker sells the property, broker may notify the MLS and member realtors of the price and terms of sale, which are required by our associations. Seller acknowledges that neither broker, the MLS, the Minnesota Association of Realtors, nor any other broker is insuring the seller or occupant against theft, loss, or vandalism. Pretty self-explanatory. Any thoughts on any of those terms, guys? Carson, Pat, Sarah?
I'm going to add an interesting situation that Carson and I faced recently. Where, sellers asked us, where in the listing agreement does it say that you as a broker represent us?
That was an interesting question. I think it threw us both off a bit.
Well, yeah. So we ended up adding wording on an addendum to the listing agreement that we represent them and act in their best interest and owe them fiduciary duties as indicated in the
agency disclosure. That may be an interesting discussion for the forms committee, and we know someone who sits on that committee.
Maybe. Yep. Jot that one down.
Yep.
Okay.
The specific language that Pat stated is not present in the agreement.
Okay.
Right. It kind of says what we're going to do and what the seller's going to do.
I think it's implied and the details are listed out, but the actual words are not directly stated.
Right. But when someone's asking you, where does it say this? And you're trying to say, well, it's implied, ultimately we ended up just adding the wording in,
Sure.
which was okay with us. So.
Okay. I just made a note. I'll bring it up.
Yeah.
Next committee meeting. Okay. So let's go to line 25, MLS data feed options, and then explanations and definitions. IDX site means a website operated by the broker participating in the MLS in which the broker can advertise listings of other brokers on the MLS subject to certain MLS rules. The consumer visiting the IDX site is not required to register on the site or have a brokerage relationship with the broker displaying the listings. That just means this listing is going to be syndicated. Syndication means there are probably thousands of sites that pull MLS data from the MLS association, the hub, where the data utility, where that data is stored, and it syndicates out in a variety of formats. For instance, brokerage website, we put a listing on the market, our brokerage website picks it up within an hour. It's usually 20 minutes and then features that listing for sale along with every other broker that has MLS access. So explaining syndication to a seller can be helpful too, so they understand the timing of syndication and what an MLS data feed is. So
I totally agree with that, Nick. And we tell our sellers that we might post it for example, late on a Thursday so that it has time to fully syndicate to multiple sites and third-party companies by the next day, which would be Friday in that example.
Right.
Because they don't all happen in 15 minutes. Yes.
I was listening to a broker on the news the other day, which I actually disagreed with. And they said, and I don't even think this person was a broker. It was not even an industry official, just someone with knowledge of real estate said that the best day to list a property is Thursday. You know, I kind of disagree because we used to say Wednesday was the best day to list a property because syndication was slower years ago. Now syndication has sped up, but
Yes.
I like to suggest, and of course everybody has their own strategy with this, but I like to list property on a Wednesday, advertising first open for the coming weekend, to allow enough syndication for clients to get their notifications. Because if you think about the length of time it takes a property to syndicate out to the website, and then that website triggers a notification to the client who has an account set up on that website, you know, whatever website it is. I like to give it 3 days so they can digest it, you know, and wait. They like to wait for that first open and come through the open. But there's lots of strategy behind that. That could be a whole nother class, I think.
Yeah, that is more into the strategy, but I agree with you because, well, even it's a strategy, of course, but people sitting at their work computer will start looking on Thursdays as they approach the weekend. And Sarah just made a valid comment that's where coming soon, and I've started using this practice as well. Coming soon a few days before helps that cause and gives people a chance to, it allows it to syndicate to all the sites, gives people a better chance to see it and then request their visits.
There you go. We'll have to have a whole nother class on listing timing and syndication. Okay, let's move on to line 30, VOWs. Now we don't, no, I'm just going to read it first. Virtual office website, VOW, means a website operated by a broker participating in the MLS that delivers brokerage services to consumers over the World Wide Web. Boy, you don't hear that term anymore.
No.
Visitors to a VOW are required to register on the site with their name and real email address and enter a brokerage relationship with the broker operating the VOW. Now, the broker operating the VOW can show the visitor, customer, client, nearly all the information available to the broker in the MLS. The seller of a listing has the right to opt out of certain kinds of data display under MLS VOW policy. The MLS imposes various other rules and restrictions on VOWs. Now, VOWs. I don't have a lot of background on VOWs because we're so used to IDX feeds. Does anybody else have an opinion on VOWs?
I think the language is a little old, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is really within the contract here. This is kind of like a definition, you know.
Yeah.
So I honestly don't really discuss that much with my clients usually.
What the
I
difference
go to
is.
the next section, the options down below,
Sure.
discuss
Sure.
those.
Yeah. We need to know what a VOW is, right? So it's basically a deeper portal as far as my understanding that displays more data. And to be honest, I don't know a lot about VOWs anymore. Even if I did 10 years ago, I've forgotten everything about them. So 36, for each of the following options, MLS automatically defaults to yes. The seller's instructions pertaining to the internet display of MLS data input for the property are as follows. Bear with me while I scroll down. There we go. Okay, 38 is page number, 39 is property located at, property address. On line 40, option 1, listing display on the internet. If the seller selects no, the listing will not be included in the MLS data feeds to the internet websites that display property listing data, whether intended or advertising the property or providing online brokerage services. An example, VOWs. Brokers participating in MLS can still disclose the listing to customers and clients via other means, including fax, email, mail, hand delivery, or orally. Shall the property listing be displayed on the internet, including sold information? Yes or no? We default to yes, just because we want the seller to have the best marketing possible and the most chances possible to get a showing and a contract, right? Line 45, seller understands and acknowledges that if the seller selected no for option 1, consumers who are conducting searches for listings on the internet will not see the information about the property in response to their searches. Pretty self-explanatory. You don't want it on the MLS? I've asked the seller in the past, you don't want it on the MLS? Why do you want to sell it? You know, we got to sell it. We got to, I don't understand the thing. Some people, you know, privacy is a concern for them, and they have some preconceived notions about agents driving by and people knocking on their door and things like that. And I mean, those are valid concerns for some, and we have to talk through the likelihood of those kinds of things happening. I mean, the MLS and association, we are governed by a lot of strict rules about unauthorized showings and unauthorized access and so on and so forth. And we can usually have a good chat with the seller about how those function, and we don't see a lot of that anymore. So line 48, if no was, oh, let's see, wait. Yeah, okay. Line 48, if no was selected on option 1, skip options 2 and 4. Understood. If yes was selected for option 1, can option 1, continue option 2. Here we go. Option 2, line 49, listing address, house and unit numbers and street name displayed on the internet. If the seller selects no, the address of the property will be hidden on websites receiving data feeds from the MLS that result in internet listing display, whether intended for advertising or the property or providing online brokerage services, VOWs. Brokers participating in MLS can still disclose the address to consumers' clients via other means, including email, fax, mail, hand delivery, and orally. Shall the listing address, house and unit numbers, and street name be displayed on the internet? Yes or no? Any thoughts behind those? Have you guys, in your length of time in the business, had anybody question that? Carson,
I've had
Pat,
it
Sarah.
questioned, but I recommend that we need those to be answered yes.
Yeah.
The one that we historically opted out of most of the time was the comments, the last option on that form. And I generally recommend even including that now, because we need that data out there. Pat, do you want to add?
Well, I've never had anyone want no on 1 or 2. Usually 4, most people are
Right.
selecting no. 3 can go either way. So I'll comment more after you read 3.
That's good. Okay. Line 56, option 3, an automated valuation of the property listing or link to an automated valuation of it may be displayed adjacent to the listing, which is more common these days than it used to be 10 years ago. It seems like every website now shows sold data and shows percentage of list price sold and all that information. So it's more common now than it used to be. Some VOWs or IDX sites may provide an automated valuation model, AVM function service. Ours does. An AVM uses statistical calculation to estimate the value of the property based upon data from public records, MLS, and other sources, and incorporating certain assumptions. The accuracy of AVMs has sometimes been criticized because they do not take into consideration all relevant factors in valuing a property. 100% true. Seller, by selecting no, may prohibit display of automated valuation of his or her listing adjacent to the listing. Now, line 63, shall an automatic valuation of the property listing or link to an automated valuation be displayed adjacent to the listing? Boy, there's one AVM that everybody talks about, right? And we know who that is.
Yeah. Well, here's my thoughts on this. So, and I don't know, and maybe you know, Nick or Carson or Sarah, but with our MLS system, we have Realist, that comes from CoreLogic, and then we have RPR, and both of them offer automated valuations. And so my assumption, but I don't know for sure, is if someone clicks no on this, that's supposed to mean that those automated valuations aren't going to show up on the listing, on the links with the listing. Is that true or not? And usually when someone clicks no on this, that's because we've looked at those valuations and they're maybe quite a bit lower than the list price. So we don't really want people to see those. Does anyone have more insight or knowledge on that?
I'm not aware of how the data utility functions as far as AVMs. And if we doing a listing input, I know Carson probably has some more insight on this too. If we uncheck this on the listing input, where it actually disappears and if that's even enforced anymore, I don't know. Carson, what have you?
Yeah. Well, I think it is generally shared, but it would have those corresponding boxes would have to be marked when the listing is entered, which goes directly to Northstar MLS. But the opt-out would be followed, but the majority of them all get posted out there, and the information is used for the analytics we're speaking of.
Yeah. I mark no for number 3, and it doesn't seem to affect anything because where I sell it's harder to determine values with a lot of acreage properties and stuff, and it doesn't seem to make a difference. Just a heads up. So.
Well, has anyone noticed where you check off no, when you're entering it, And then go in there on the MLS, to look at the links to the core logic and RPR. Has anyone actually, I should follow up sometime and look and see if the valuation disappears or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to ask
I've not
that question in the next meeting, form committee meeting, and
I
ask
agree.
if this is a valid thing anymore.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about this?
Go for it.
So every listing I've ever done, I've always advised the clients to say yes to all four, because I was told that if you decline any one of these, you might not be put on as many websites, that the AVM might not just disappear, but that it might not be put onto certain websites that only accept listings with all four.
For the first 3 boxes, Jacob, I would totally agree. It could restrict the exposure.
Nick, I think you're muted. Or at least I didn't hear Nick say anything.
I didn't
hear me?
hear it either.
Can you hear me now? Hang on. Okay. Well, I don't know what's going on. I would question that. I would like to know that for sure. So a little research would probably have to be done to find out if it actually disappears on any third-party website, because that's good to know. I hate to base it on an assumption.
Yeah, and there's layers of this. If a brokerage such as ours authorizes our regional MLS system to share the data, then I think it more than likely all gets shared. So there may be some updates needed on some of these form language, which we're finding questions more than we are anticipating here today.
Yeah, no, it's all great questions and things that, as involved as most of us are in our association, can affect good discussion and change if things do need to change. So this is all great stuff. Okay. So let's see, am I on option 4, right? Option 4. Comments or reviews of property by persons other than displaying broker may be displayed with or attached as a link to the listing data on the property. Some VOWs or IDX sites may provide functionality that permits customers' clients using the VOW or IDX site to enter comments or reviews with the listing or by hyperlinks such as comments to such comments or reviews. Note that the broker displaying the listing on his or her VOW or IDX site may add commentary representing his or her professional judgment regarding the listing's value. Shall comments or reviews of the property by persons other than displaying broker be displayed or attached as a link to the listing data of the property? Yes or no? Now, that's another question of, does this even exist anymore?
Yeah.
Right. Used to exist. I can't say in my internet searching in the real estate industry, I have seen third-party commentary on listings anymore. Have you guys? Maybe our window of our scope of knowledge is small. I mean, it very well could be, but I don't think I've seen it anywhere anymore. So
yeah. And Sarah just commented she's verified with her own listings where she's marked those boxes, but do we have that corresponding box to mark when the listing is entered by the office in MLS?
I'm just reading comments. Sarah, is your audio not working?
It's kind of in and out today, so
okay.
Hopefully it's working now. But I always mark no to number 3, and I just checked some active and pending listings that we have, and I know I've been marked no to, and it's still listing the AVM and stuff. So,
okay.
Just side note on that. So yeah, definitely something I think it'd be awesome to look into. I think there might be some antiquated language there that we should figure out. So.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we're discovering things here. That's for sure.
Not to add confusion to these 4 options, which encompass a whole page of a listing agreement, right? But it's good. It's a good discussion. I've always just been a check yes guy. Check yes. Let's not be paranoid about comments or anything else. Let's get the most exposure we can get, and we'll deal with it later. And limited scope too of how much business I've done. You never know. I mean, it may well affect other people, but let's keep discussing it as an industry and see if we can.
Well, and it's great to have questions come out of these discussions and training so that we can further investigate. Yep,
absolutely. Okay, line 73, listed for lease. The property is or is not currently listed for lease. If is, the listing broker is blank. If is not, the seller may or may not list the property for lease during the terms of the contract with another broker. And line 76, nothing in this contract shall prohibit broker or seller from entering into a listing agreement for lease of this property upon terms acceptable to both parties. That's the important phrase.
Mhm.
So you have to have a discussion.
I don't want to belabor this. It doesn't happen very often, Nick, but this
Right.
is the summary that's important. This is the only place where one PID can be under contract to be posted available on the MLS is rent or sale.
Sure.
We can't have it in two different places, two different types of properties. This is the only occasion where we can have it represented in two different manners.
Sure. You know, I pre-fill these as is not and may not, but just like line 76 and 77 says, if something comes up and you agree to it as a representative of the brokerage with the seller, then that's fine. Just make sure you have it in writing. Probably best to have a discussion with the broker at that point on how that would all look, or someone, associate broker. Okay, page 3, line 79, full address. Oh, here comes one. I'm gonna drink my water. I gotta read this one. Line 80, seller's obligation. Seller shall notify broker of relevant information important to the sale of the property, and seller shall cooperate with the broker in selling the property. Seller shall promptly inform the broker about all inquiries seller receives about the property. Now, I'm going to stop because that's important, because I have had sellers in the past where there are door knockers and there are neighbors walking up and wanting information. And I always tell the sellers, you know, I represent you. I need to know what's going on. So just tell me and I can help address questions, because that does happen. Third-party inquiries directly to the seller, and especially with social media these days. I don't know if you guys have seen this. There are other people wanting to buy houses messaging sellers directly, and they found out who it is and they message them directly. So it's a good expectation to set with the seller that you receive any third-party communication. You don't have to answer it. I can answer it for you. Just let them know you're there to support them. Any thoughts on those? No, never happened to you guys? No? What? Okay, I'll keep going then. Okay, seller agrees to provide and pay for any inspections and reports required by any governmental authority. Truth in housing, truth in sale, right? Seller
Yes.
agrees to provide unit owners association documents if required. Seller shall remain responsible for security, maintenance, utilities, and other insurance during the term of this contract, and for safekeeping, securing, and or concealing any valuable personal property. Now, this is something we always talk to listing sellers in a listing situation. Put your meds out of sight, put your valuables out of sight. Not that people are in there to steal, but it's always good just to pack up what you're not going to need in the next 30 days, or pack up medications, firearms, jewelry, you know, valuable items. Just keep them out of sight. So.
It's really an important discussion. You know, we've had classes about realtor safety, but oftentimes we don't even necessarily think about our client safety, but it's really rather important that we have that kind of a discussion with the seller. You know, people might come and knock on your door when they see your for sale sign, you know, and you don't let them in unless they have an appointment. And it's really important for the seller to check everything after every showing. You know, are the windows locked, unlocked doors, things like that are important. So it's a good discussion to have with sellers that most agents don't have.
I know for all this time you guys have had in the business and I've had in the business, I can almost recite the showing response notes on a showing time. It's like lock all doors, leave a card, shut off lights. You know, it's like a standardized language after every showing, reminding agents to secure the property the way they found it. I mean, I've had situations too where sellers have wanted to leave the patio door unlocked for a reason, but a thorough agent has gone in there and had a showing and then locked all the doors, or locked the garage door where the seller just uses the garage door opener and walks in the house through the garage door. It's very important to leave it how you found it. Leave it how you found it. Make those mental notes.
It is really important to talk those things through, and I would recommend putting a little sign up if that garage door, if the seller says, "Oh, we don't know where the key is to that door, so don't lock it," then put a little note card up and make a professional note in the house.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Very good point. I've had seller, I've shown property and locked the door, whereas someone was showing it ahead of me and they weren't supposed to lock, or they were supposed to leave it open, and the confusion, and the seller was locked out, and yada, yada, yada. So leave a note, right? Put a note up as a listing agent.
Yeah. I don't want to get into the weeds, but things have gotten more interesting with technology, and we have a house going on the market where they control all their lights from their phones, and we're going to be out of town. So they ended up changing light bulbs to conventional light bulbs because of people going in and shutting things on and off manually.
Yeah, the day and age. It's
I know.
amazing how the industry develops.
Overriding electronic door locks, and so there's things to discuss as you walk through a house.
Sure. That's a great point. Okay, let's continue. Line 85. Seller shall surrender any abstract of title. We see these in outside Torrance markets where there's still abstracts. We do operate in North Dakota too. We still have abstracts. Surrender any abstracts of title and a copy of any owner's title insurance policy for this property, if in seller's possession or control, to the buyer or buyer's designated title service provider. Seller shall take all actions necessary to convey marketable title by the date of closing as agreed to in the purchase agreement. Seller shall sign all documents necessary to transfer buyer marketable title to the property. Seller has the full legal right to sell the property. Any thoughts on those final sentences, guys?
Well, that full legal right reminds me, it goes back to the line of who the seller is. And if there's any confusion, I get preliminary title research done to verify that.
Yeah. Okay.
I did have a question up on line 82 and 3 about seller agrees to provide and pay for any inspections and reports required by a governmental authority. And just thinking of like experiences working with septic compliance out in rural areas. And, some people do it right. And sometimes you come across a listing that says, I don't know, septic not compliant, buyers to assume, or get your own, do whatever, figure it out. Is there any way of negotiating that back to being a seller responsibility?
Well, it becomes a negotiation. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, no, I'm going to say, Carson and I are going to say the same thing, right? I think it's going to be it always defaults to the seller via the contract language, but whatever's agreeable between the parties is what's going to happen, right?
Well, and the D word applies, as you're saying, Nick. If it's in the contract that the seller pays and completes those things, and for some reason they are choosing not to, then it must be disclosed and negotiated in the purchase.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we're repping buyers who are buying a rural property like that, we might not know if they signed this exact contract, right? We can't just assume.
Well, it would be on the listing agent side to ensure that it's disclosed. I cannot guarantee they will do that in all cases, but
yeah, we have private sewer and well disclosures for that reason too. So
correct.
Through discovery, through the disclosures, and through discovery through the inspection process, you can usually uncover what's been done and what's not been done. And yes, rural properties are a little more challenging due to the more layers of inspections due to private sewer. And Sarah's nodding yes, because Sarah and I both have done a lot of out of town stuff that you got to be pretty thorough as a buyer's agent, listing agent, just to make sure you're presenting it in the right the right condition, helping the seller do their disclosures too, advising them what to over disclose all the time. So we make sure to cover our bases that way. Okay, line 90, access to property. To facilitate the showing and sale of the property, seller authorizes broker to 1, access the property; 2, authorize other brokers and their salespersons, inspectors, appraisers, contractors, and other industry professionals to access the property at reasonable times upon reasonable notice, and duplicate keys to facilitate convenient and efficient showings on the property. Pretty self-explanatory. Thoughts on that? We have to advise sellers and set good expectations, what they expect for showings and showing times, and what's acceptable to them. And this day and age, we have useful showing software depending on the market you're in that helps us do that efficiently.
Well, and it's a good time for us to inform our sellers that we can manage that and block out specific times. We've got people with a little kid, and so they're blocked after 7 o'clock.
Yeah,
I was going to say something similar. I advise to get written documentation of this. So in other words, you're talking with a seller about this, and the seller would, you're going to set it up on Go and Show with automated showings with a notice to them. But the specifics that are important is how will they be notified? Is it text, email, or both? Do they want hours blocked off, as Carson said? Do they want a certain amount of notice time, like 24 hours or 2 hours or whatever? So if you get that all in writing, I think is good for us. Then, we kind of confirm that we set the settings properly and allowed access only under the terms that the seller wants.
We do have an input sheet available that we can
Right.
put out there for showing time specifically with seller preferences that could help that situation. But let me know privately if we want to enact that as a standard form that we
think
include in our kits.
Just an email exchange with the seller
That too.
is good, I think.
Okay. Yep. Great. 95, authorizing access means giving broker permission to allow the above referenced persons to enter the property with or without a licensed salesperson present. Disclosing to the other person in any security codes necessary to enter the property, and lending a key to the other person to enter the property directly through a lockbox. Seller agrees to commit no act which may tend to obstruct the broker's performance here. If the property is occupied by someone other than the seller should comply with Minnesota law and any applicable lease provisions of any existing lease and provide tenant proper notice in advance of any property showing. Seller understands that prospective buyers and others authorized to access the property may record the property by photograph, video, or other medium while accessing the property. Now, there's a lot of information packed into that paragraph. But pretty self-explanatory. Does anybody have any questions on that one? Check with the tenant. Check what the lease says with the tenant. Do you have to give them 24-hour notice? What is spelled out in the lease, and so on.
We at this point, it's wise for us, and we do talk with our sellers about not recording buyers.
Seller intends to utilize technology that may intercept oral communications between persons other than the seller. This is such a common thing these days. Ring doorbells, where we tell our clients when we're leaving the property, let's not stand on the front doorstep and discuss what we didn't like about the property right here, just because of this fact. And home technology is advancing.
Goes right back to what I was saying about baby monitors and recording devices inside the house.
Yep. So we have to advise sellers on what this paragraph says, and they got to seek legal advice regarding compliance because we're not legal professionals. Okay. Seller content license. In the event seller provides content, including but not limited to any photos, videos, property, seller content to broker. Seller grants to broker non-exclusive, perpetual, worldwide, transferable, royalty-free license to sub-license, including through multiple tiers, reproduce, distribute, display, perform, or create or derivative works of the seller content. Seller represents and warrants that the seller has the authority to provide seller content. Seller content does not violate any restrictions regarding use, including any third-party intellectual property rights or laws. And the seller agrees to execute any further documents that are necessary to effect this license. Very complex paragraph that says, whatever the seller gives us to work with, we're going to work with it without restriction, which is what we want. We want to put really solid marketing out there, and we use a number of media to do that, and medium to do that: written, video, pictures. That just states that the seller grants us full use of that. Thoughts on that paragraph? Anybody? No. Okay. Let's keep going.
Let's keep moving on.
Let's keep going. Okay, line 113, notice. The compensation for the sale, lease, rental, or management property shall be determined between each individual broker and the broker's client. Now, broker's compensation, we're going to talk through broker's compensation, and with the note that broker's compensation is negotiated between us and the client, and anything in here is fillable and changeable. And we just try to standardize what we put in our contracts to help agents easily work through contracts. So we're not going to state anything about commission, we can talk commission privately later on strategy and what we like to do, but we're just going to go through the broker compensation lines. Okay.
Good
Line
plan.
116. Line 116, seller agrees to pay the broker retainer fee of blank at the commencement of this contract, which fee should be kept by the broker whether or not the seller sells the property. The retainer fee will also apply towards satisfaction of any obligation to compensate broker. Now, all I'm going to say here, and I think Pat and I covered this in detail in the buy rep when we came to the line of retainer, is that you can charge a retainer, but you have to talk to the client about the situation and talk to the broker about, why we feel it should be charged and come up with a strategy at that point. It's doable. It just depends on the situation. So I just put zeros in there because we don't see it a lot, but in a select situation, it's certainly valid. So 19, broker shall pay broker as broker's compensation percentage. So you put a percentage in there of the selling price or the minimum 2,500, whichever is greater. If the seller sells or agrees to sell the property during the term of the contract. Okay. So brokered percentage and the minimum, I put 2,500 as a minimum because these days, we don't see a lot of lower listings where calculating the percentage is less than that. But like I said, that's all a discussion with the seller and what's acceptable and the discussion with the broker. This is just pre-filled for ease of use. And then line 122, other seller to pay one-time broker's administrative commission of $495 due upon closing. That applies to our Minnesota brokerages. We do charge a broker's administrative commission BAC of $495 to help keep the lights on. That's all I'm going to say about that. And that too is between the seller and the agent and the brokerage and can be talked about, negotiated to the satisfaction of all parties. Okay.
I just want to mention with that whole section that I mean, we are in the business of providing good service, making money for our service, and limiting to the extent possible liability. We're all about providing good service, and within all this, I want you to think creatively. We want to do business. That's what we're here to do, and if doing business means being creative here, talk to us. Remember, it's a contract between the broker and the client, but we want opportunity, and so talk with Carson. We want to do business, basically, provide good service, keep our liability down, and make money.
Agreed. We're creative people. Let's be creative. We want to overcome objections and help the seller sell a property. Let's be creative and like Pat said, get your heads together with people who've been in the business and seen situations and come up with a solution. So
can anybody give suggestions as to what they tell people that $495 is for? Because if you tell them it's an administrative fee, they don't really understand what that means. If you tell them it's to leave the lights on, well, $495. I mean,